Okay, we want to acknowledge that we are on Chochenyo and Ohlone land, and we acknowledge that that as people of the Bay Area and California, we recognize their continuing connection to the land, waters, and culture, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, as well as emerging. So we want to welcome today our speaker, and we're glad you could be here to talk about National Family Caregivers Month. As part of this National Family Caregivers Month, the All Access Employee Resource Group and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office are hosting this seminar with our guest speaker today, Anna Le Mon. Caregivers have a really tough job, as many of you know, whether they're caring for aging parents or for a child with special needs. Our guest speaker today will discuss the physical, emotional, as well as the financial aspects of caregiving. Anna Le Mon is the Director of Care Management at Senior Alternatives, a comprehensive home care and care management agency in Oakland. She has a Master's of Social Work and a Master's of Public Health from Columbia University. In addition, Anna Le Mon worked for several years as a medical social worker, assisting Medicare patients with complex care coordination and medical advocacy. In addition, Anna is a longtime master trainer with the Chronic Disease Self-Management Program and has an extensive background in health education. So I'd like us all to give a warm welcome to Anna.
Thank you so much. All right, so as it is National Caregiving Month, I do want to honor that by talking a bit about family caregivers today. And the first piece is that I want us to all just take a deep breath and exhale. Thank you. It can be an emotional topic, and I imagine that some of you here today, if you're not already dealing with a situation in which you're dealing with a caregiving situation at home, or maybe a friend or another family member is dealing with that you may in the future. So this could be a very informative topic for you. So first and foremost, who are informal caregivers? And informal caregivers are, I'm going to use that interchangeably with family caregivers. So informal caregivers, that's a picture of a mirror on your slide. It could be any of us today, really. So it could be a spouse, partner, adult child, our parents, other relatives, or maybe friends or neighbors. And typically, these are not folks, including us, who are trained to do this job. So we end up just sort of falling into it by circumstance. I want to give you some statistics on caregiving because I feel like it's important to have an understanding of who caregivers are, where we come from, that sort of thing. So not terribly surprisingly, about 75%, or at least 75% of caregivers are female, and our typical age is around 49. The average age of care recipients is 69. So we're mostly talking about older adults, not always, but for the most part. But almost half of these care recipients are at least 75 years old. So typically this is a parent of an adult child. Again, these are statistics, so take those with a grain of salt always. But family caregivers supposedly tend to spend an average of about 24 to 25 hours a week providing care, but at least 25% of those caregivers are doing at least full time. So this is a lot of work. And many caregivers, and I'll talk about this later, are also working at least part, if not full-time jobs outside of the home. The average duration of a caregiver's role is 4 years, but of course this can flex on either side of that, often on the higher side. And again, I want to preface this next piece with the race and ethnicity demographics by saying that all statistics should be taken with a grain of salt. And certainly in this particular poll that I'm citing, I imagine that the choices were quite limited. But just to give us a sense, in this particular poll, the individual adult caregivers have identified as approximately 62% white, 17% Hispanic, 13% African American, and 6% Asian American. And this roughly correlates with the population of the US, but not exactly. But I think that there are probably some areas in which these numbers are low due to role identity. And I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So how many people are we even talking about? Well, there are, again, according to numbers, almost 44 million people providing informal caregiving to an unpaid, by informal I mean unpaid, to an adult or child. 34 million of that 44 million are providing care for an adult at least age 50 or above. And of those 34 million, 16 million are caring for someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So as far as gender is concerned, approximately 65% of care recipients are female. But interestingly, the younger the care recipient, the more likely he is to be male or identify as male. So for instance, for men ages 18 to 45, 45% of care recipients ages 18 to 45 are male, while only 33% of recipients ages 50 plus are male. So you can see that there's a difference there. And as far as caregiving in the LGBT communities, approximately 9% of caregivers self-identify as LGBT, but there are at least 3 million LGBT persons ages 55 plus in the US, and this number is expected to double in the next 2 decades. So this has very important policy, advocacy, and personal caregiving implications, as well as legal implications for those personal caregivers and care recipients for the future. So you may have heard the term sandwich generation before, and this is a relatively common term, and it's going to be increasingly common as the baby boomers age, because right now, even nearly half of adults in their 40s and 50s, I can identify in this group now, have a parent ages 65 plus and are either raising a young child or are financially supporting a grown child. So they're sandwiched in between these two groups. And polling wise, their rates of happiness actually tend to be pretty similar to what I'm calling the unsandwiched folks. So sometimes this means that good things can come out of the situation. So for example, there are kids who are going to get to know their grandparents a bit better, possibly, or there are old family issues that have been able to be resolved because the adult children are spending more time with their parents, and this turns out to be a good thing. Or that maybe a child can learn more about their family history, that sort of thing. But the main issue, or the main point, is that it's important not to be a martyr, because we can't be all things to all people. So it's important to really make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. And I'll talk a lot about that in a few minutes.